The first time I saw my stolen sneakers walking past my own lawn, the world narrowed to a scuff on the left toe, a tiny crescent I'd made tripping over my coffee table. That's how I knew. Grant Whitlow, golden child of our HOA president, was strutting in my limited edition lunar blaze like they were his birthright. His mother Karen ruled our cul-de-sac with a plastic clipboard and a dictator's smile, petty fines, invented bylaws, threats delivered as neighborly reminders. I wanted to explode. Instead, I opened a notebook and a browser tab. If they thought I'd fold, they picked the wrong porch. I'm Ethan Cole, and this is how a glitter speck of justice blew open a crime ring hiding behind HOA letterhead. How a decoy package, a pinhole camera, and a drop of Hulk green dye turned the queen of fines into Exhibit A. Tonight, the porch pirate meets the trap, and the neighborhood meets the truth. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is locally. When I first moved into Willow Ridge Estates, I thought I was stepping into a quiet suburban dream, tree-lined sidewalks, postcard lawns, and a promise of community values. But behind every manicured hedge lurked Karen Whitlow, our self-appointed queen. She wasn't just the HOA president. She was the judge, jury, and executioner of everything from grass height to mailbox color. At first, I tried to stay invisible. I paid my dues, waved politely, kept my shrubs neat. But the first sign of trouble came wrapped in brown cardboard and a printed shipping label, a box I never saw again. I shrugged it off at first. Maybe the courier misplaced it. Then the second package vanished. Then the third. It became a pattern. My deliveries were evaporating into thin air, while Karen's son Grant suddenly sported new gadgets, clothes, and shoes that looked eerily familiar. The breaking point came one morning in early spring. I was watering my small garden, my escape from the chaos of remote work, when I saw him swaggering down the sidewalk. Grant, 17, smug grin plastered across his face, chatting loudly with two friends. On his feet glimmered deep blue sneakers with silver streaks, the kind that catch sunlight like shards of a mirror. The Lunar Blaze limited edition, only 200 pairs ever made. Mine. My pulse thudded in my temples. I looked closer. The left toe had a small, crescent-shaped scuff, my scuff from the night I'd tripped while trying them on in the living room. That imperfection was proof like a fingerprint carved in fabric. I felt the watering can tilt in my hand, water spilling onto the bricks as the realization hit. He looked up, saw me staring, and smiled, not a friendly smile, but the slow, taunting smirk of someone who knows he can get away with it. He even lifted his foot, admired the shoe as though he were modeling it, then winked before turning to leave. That single motion told me everything. He knew. And worse, his mother knew too. You can't confront people like the Whitlows head-on. Not when Karen controls every complaint, every fine, every HOA vote. Marching up to their door would only end with a violation notice in my mailbox and a neighborhood email about aggressive behavior. I'd seen it before. Mr. Henderson had spoken out once about a drainage issue. 2 weeks later, he was fined for unauthorized decorative rocks. So instead of shouting, I started writing. A clean notebook, black ink, a label on the first page, the Whitlow file. It felt ridiculous at first, like I was building a case in a detective novel, but it gave me back a sliver of control. I documented everything, delivery times, confirmation emails, even sketches of Grant's shoes. One entry became 2, then 3. A few days later, the retaliation began. A notice taped to my front door. Violation, improperly coiled garden hose, $50. Fine. I stared at the perfectly functional coil of rubber and felt my jaw lock. 2 days after I paid it, another arrived. Mailbox flag left upright over 24 hours, $50. Fine. It was death by paperwork. Petty, precise, and meant to remind me who held power. Karen was tightening her grip, and for the first time I wondered if the missing packages were part of something bigger than neighborhood pettiness. That's when I started talking to my neighbors, quietly, casually. Mrs. Gable from across the street whispered that she'd been fined because her welcome mat faded too much under the Sunday mister. Henderson, same man who once built model planes for kids on the block, got charged for noise pollution from his wind chimes. Everyone had a story, each more absurd than the last. And then as we compared our letters and fines, a darker truth surfaced. The HOA's beautification fund, supposedly supported by those fines, was paying for suspicious upgrades, a new fountain at Karen's home, her freshly repaved driveway and custom landscaping. None of us had approved. The more I connected the dots, the angrier I became. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was weaponizing them. She fined people she disliked, ignored her own violations, and quietly built a kingdom of fear funded by our wallets. and now she was literally stealing from our porches. Still, anger wasn't going to fix it. I needed proof, not rumors, not suspicions. Evidence. Something even Karen couldn't manipulate. That night, as I flipped through pages of my growing file, I remembered what my best friend Dave always told me when I ranted about HOA nonsense. Don't fight fire with fire, Ethan. Fight it with documentation. That became my mantra. I stopped reacting emotionally and started thinking strategically. The next morning, I drove to the local hardware store and bought a small birdhouse. Not for decoration, but for surveillance. After a deep dive into online forums, I found what I needed: 2 miniature pinhole cameras disguised as everyday objects. One would go inside the birdhouse facing the porch, the other in the door frame invisible unless you knew where to look. That was step 1, watch them. Step 2 would take patience and a bit of petty creativity, because if Karen loved stealing packages, then I'd give her one worth stealing. I began planning the bait. I wanted something harmless yet unforgettable, something that would expose her without crossing the line into criminal mischief. I remembered the viral glitter bombs, those harmless decoys that exploded in a storm of sparkles when opened. But mine needed an upgrade, a signature, not just glitter evidence. I spent the next week gathering materials: biodegradable, glitter skin-safe neon dye, and a small GPS tracker that could ping its location from anywhere in town. My neighbor, Mitch, a retired mechanical engineer with a garage full of tools and grudges against Karen, helped me assemble it. For justice, he said, grinning, as we fitted tiny spring-loaded arms inside the cardboard box. We tested it 3 times in his garage. Each time it exploded perfectly, a shower of glowing green dust and shimmering particles that stuck to everything it touched. Completely harmless, completely humiliating. I sealed the trap inside a box, printed with a fake shipping label, something flashy and expensive looking like Elite Sound Pro electronics. Then, on a bright Saturday morning, I placed it neatly on my porch for the world and one particular HOA president to see. From that moment, the waiting began. I didn't sleep much the first night. Every sound outside made me glance at the monitor. A stray cat, a jogger, a gust of wind. Nothing. The second night, same story. I started to think maybe she'd learned her lesson, but on the third afternoon, the silver SUV appeared slow, deliberate, predatory. Karen Whitlow herself stepped out, clipboard in hand, pretending to inspect a neighbor's hedges. Then her eyes found the package. My heart pounded. She looked left, looked right. The street was empty. Then she walked up my driveway, lifted the box, and vanished back into her car. 10 seconds. That was all it took. I exhaled slowly, watching the footage replay on my laptop. She'd finally taken the bait. And she had no idea she was carrying home her own downfall, a ticking, glitter-filled confession wrapped in cardboard. I didn't have to wait long for the fireworks. 15 minutes after Karen's SUV rolled out of view, the little blue dot on my GPS app stopped moving, parked right at her address across the cul-de-sac. I could picture the scene unfolding behind those beige curtains, Karen smug and self-satisfied, dropping her inspection clipboard on the counter, gloating about another successful confiscation in the name of community order. She had no idea that the plain brown box under her arm was armed with the most obnoxious weapon known to suburbia: neon green justice. I kept my camera feed open on one monitor and the GPS tracker on the other. The sunlight began to fade, shadows stretching long across the lawn. Then, through my front window, I saw movement at her door. Karen appeared, holding the package in both hands. She looked around just once, then disappeared inside. 10 seconds later, a muffled pop echoed faintly across the street, followed by the shriek of a banshee. I leapt up. The door to her house burst open, and out stormed Karen Whitlow, covered head to toe in glowing green dye and glitter. It was biblical. Her white blouse looked radioactive, her face streaked with emerald and sparkle like the Wicked Witch of the West had gone clubbing. She screamed, spinning in circles, waving her arms wildly as if she could fling the glitter off her skin. It only made it worse. I hit record on my phone just in time to capture the moment she looked straight at my window. Our eyes met, hers wide, with fury, mine wide, with the sheer disbelief that this was actually happening. She pointed one trembling, green-stained finger at me and screeched something incoherent before stumbling back into her house. I didn't laugh right away. For a second, I just stood there, heart hammering, realizing the scale of what had just happened. I had video evidence, full HD, 2 angles of the HOA president stealing a package and detonating a glitter bomb on herself. But more than that, I'd cracked something deeper, her mask of control. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to retreat quietly. She'd come back swinging. And sure enough, within an hour, an HOA emergency notice hit every neighbor's inbox. Subject line: urgent safety warning, hazardous package incident. According to the email, a resident had knowingly placed a dangerous chemical device on their porch. She didn't name me, but she didn't need to. Everyone knew. I didn't respond. Instead, I backed up my footage to 3 different clouds, burned a copy onto a USB drive, and labeled it Evidence 001. Then I turned my attention back to the tracker. The blue dot hadn't moved since the explosion, but late that night, around 9:47 p.m., it suddenly began to drift. It left her house, followed the main road, and headed west toward the industrial district. My curiosity ignited again. Was she dumping it? Hiding something I threw on a jacket and followed from a distance, headlights off. The dot led me to lock-safe storage, a sprawling complex surrounded by chain-link fences and rusted signage. I parked across the street, phone in hand, and watched as her silver SUV rolled up to the keypad. The gate slid open, swallowing her vehicle whole. For 15 minutes, the GPS dot stayed still somewhere near the back row of units. Then it moved again, exiting the property. She drove back toward Willow Ridge as if nothing had happened. But my tracker remained behind, pinging steadily from inside one of the locked units. When the coast was clear, I approached the fence carefully, staying on the public sidewalk. Through a narrow gap beneath one of the roll-up doors, I aimed my phone's flashlight and camera. What I saw made my stomach drop. The storage unit wasn't empty. It was full, stacked floor to ceiling with cardboard boxes. Amazon, Target, Best Buy, Zappos, a mountain of consumer loot. I recognized the bright blue tape of Amazon Prime, the red Target logos. Every box had a shipping label. Some looked new, some battered, but all shared one thing: they weren't hers. And dusting the tops of several near the front was something unmistakable, a faint shimmer of green glitter. My glitter. I recorded everything: unit number, boxes, the public sidewalk under my feet, to prove I wasn't trespassing. Then I switched to my secret weapon, the UV flashlight Mitch had slipped me. He'd mixed a pinch of invisible fluorescent powder into our glitter, just in case, he'd said with a wink. Now, under ultraviolet light, the lock handle and even the floor inside glowed faintly like a radioactive crime scene. The whole place sparkled in ultraviolet proof. I emailed myself the video, immediately time-stamped it, and drove home with my pulse still racing. The next morning, I called the local police non-emergency line. I explained everything clearly: the thefts, the evidence, the tracker, the storage unit. The dispatcher sounded skeptical until I gave her the unit number and GPS data. "Officers will meet you there within the hour," she said. By noon, I was standing in the parking lot again, this time flanked by 2 officers. Sergeant Miller, a stocky veteran with the patience of a saint, and Officer Reyes, who had the skeptical eyes of someone who'd seen one too many suburban feuds. I showed them the footage from my porch cameras first. They watched silently, then replayed the glitter explosion twice. Miller actually snorted once, just once, before clearing his throat. "All right," he said, "that's creative. Let's see the rest." Next, I showed them the storage unit video, the glitter traces, the visible unit number, the glowing UV markings. By the time I finished, Miller wasn't laughing anymore. "You realize," he said slowly, "this might be part of a larger theft ring. These boxes could total tens of thousands of dollars." "From our neighborhood," I added. They nodded. Miller made a call for a search warrant right there in front of me. The moment it was approved, the officers cut the lock, carefully filming everything. As the door rattled open, the afternoon light poured over hundreds of stolen packages. Some still had delivery addresses clearly visible. I recognized at least 4 names from our street. It was overwhelming. Months of silent theft laid bare in a dusty, glitter-coated vault. The officers spent the next 2 hours cataloging the scene, photographing every label. Miller asked me to give an official statement, which I did with pleasure. He handed me a case number and promised I'd be notified once the inventory was complete. As I left, I glanced back at the open unit. Glitter sparkled on the floor like confetti after a victory parade. That night, the neighborhood group chat, usually dead silent except for Karen's reminders about recycling, erupted. Photos leaked from the police report, images of Karen's SUV outside the storage facility, boxes stacked like a warehouse, even a blurry shot of her driveway with faint green stains. People were stunned. Some angry, some delighted. But mostly everyone realized the truth. The woman who fined them for weeds, wind chimes, and mailbox flags had been robbing them blind. I should have felt triumphant. But I knew her too well. Karen Whitlow wasn't done. A cornered Karen was a dangerous Karen. I didn't know it yet, but the next morning she'd send 2 men in black shirts to my door with fake HOA security badges, her last desperate move before her empire collapsed. The knock came just after noon the next day, heavy, deliberate, the kind of knock that doesn't ask permission. I glanced through the peephole and froze. Two men stood on my porch wearing black polos with cheap embroidered patches that read HOA security. I'd lived in Willow Ridge Estates for 5 years, and I knew one thing for sure: our HOA didn't have a security division. The first man was tall and broad-shouldered, built like a retired linebacker. The second was thin or pale, with that restless energy of someone looking for a fight. They didn't smile. I left the chain latched and opened the door an inch. "Can I help you?" I asked. The big one spoke in a low, rehearsed growl. "Ethan Cole. The HOA president received a complaint about unauthorized surveillance equipment on your property. We need to inspect your exterior for violations." The words were so absurd that I almost laughed. Karen had gone from thief to tyrant to full-blown mob boss. "You must be mistaken," I said evenly. "If this is an official HOA matter, you can leave documentation in my mailbox like usual." The thinner one smirked. "Where the documentation?" I glanced at my doorbell camera. The little red light was blinking. "Good. Everything was being recorded." "Then I'll need to see your ID," I said. The big one leaned forward, filling the doorway. "You're already in violation," he rumbled. "That doorbell camera isn't approved by HOA exterior design guidelines." "That's interesting," I replied, "because the bylaws don't mention doorbell cameras at all." I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped the record button. "Smile, gentlemen. You're being filmed too." That flickered something in their expressions, a crack in the performance. The tall one scowled, stepping closer. "You think you're smart, huh? We can do this the easy way or the hard way." I didn't move. "You're trespassing. I'm asking you to leave." Behind them I spotted movement. Mr. Henderson, the elderly man from 2 houses down, had just stepped outside to check his mail. He paused, watching the scene unfold. Then, God bless him, he pulled out his phone and started recording as well. The lanky thug noticed and cursed under his breath. The big one glared at me. "You want to play games? Fine. Let's take a walk, smart guy. We need to inspect the back gate." "Perfect," I said, forcing calm. "Let's inspect it together." I unlatched the chain step out and hold the phone high in plain view. Every step, every word recorded. The air felt thick, hot sunlight, fresh-cut grass, the distant hum of a lawnmower. We circled toward the side yard. My backyard gate stood straight and perfectly legal, freshly painted beige to match HOA specs. "There's your gate," I said. "Looks good, doesn't it?" The big one's patience snapped. He shoved me not hard enough to injure, but enough to make me stumble into the fence. That was his mistake. "Assault," I said loudly, steadying my phone. "You just shoved me on my property." The camera saw everything. Before he could speak, Henderson's voice boomed from across the street. I got it too. On video, the two men froze. They looked back and forth, my camera, his camera, the blinking red light from the doorbell. They'd been hired to intimidate, not to end up in a police report. The color drained from their faces. "Get off my property," I said. My voice didn't shake this time. Now, they left fast down the driveway into an unmarked gray sedan parked at the curb. The car peeled off with a squeal of tires, leaving only the smell of burned rubber and cowardice. For a long moment I just stood there, catching my breath, the phone still recording. Henderson crossed the street, his hands trembling slightly, but his smile fierce. "She's lost it," he said. "Sending goons, that's a new low." "Can you send me that video?" I asked. He nodded. "Already did." By sunset, I'd compiled the footage from both our phones and the doorbell camera. 3 angles, clear audio, perfectly legal. I emailed everything to Sergeant Miller with the subject line, "Follow-up, intimidation, and assault by HOA hires." His reply came an hour later. "Received. Those men have been identified and will be questioned. You did the right thing documenting everything. Keep your distance, Mr. Cole. We're close. Close." That word pulsed in my mind all night. I could feel it, Karen's empire, wobbling the weight of her arrogance, finally cracking the foundation she'd built on intimidation and stolen mail. But I wasn't done. I'd started something that couldn't end with a few arrests. This wasn't just about my packages anymore. It was about every person she'd bullied, fined, or humiliated in the name of community standards. So I did what any stubborn engineer turned Avenger would do. I went through the HOA bylaws line by line. 73 pages of bureaucratic sludge written in 12-point Times New Roman, designed to lull dissenters into apathy. But buried halfway through Article X, Section 4, I found my weapon, the recall clause. Any member of the board of directors may be removed from office by a majority vote of the homeowners present at a duly called special meeting. To call such a meeting, all I needed were signatures from 25% of homeowners. I smiled. For once, their precious paperwork would work against them. The next morning, I printed a stack of petitions titled Petition for a Special Meeting to Recall HOA President Karen Whitlow and the Current Board. I started with Mrs. Gable. When she opened her door, I didn't even have to explain. Finally, she said, snatching the pen. That woman fined me because my hydrangeas were too vibrant. One by one, the signatures came. Mr. Henderson. The young couple whose toddler's chalk drawings had been labeled graffiti. The retired teacher fined for unauthorized porch furniture, a rocking chair she'd owned for 30 years. Every house had a story, every neighbor a scar. Within 3 days, I had double the required signatures. People weren't just signing, they were thanking me. One neighbor hugged me. Another brought coffee and cookies as we planned the meeting logistics. The fear that Karen had cultivated for years was melting away, replaced by something we hadn't felt in a long time: solidarity. I didn't tell anyone, but I'd also been preparing something else, a presentation, because if we were going to take Karen down, we'd do it in style. On my computer screen slide 1 read, Our HOA, a Journey into Madness. Beneath it, a picture of Karen's clipboard and a tiny animated gif of a cash register cha-ching. Slide 2, my violations. The hose. The mailbox flag. Side by side with photos proving how ridiculous they were. Slide 3, my porch footage, Karen stealing the box, then exploding in neon glory. Slide 4, the storage unit, hundreds of stolen packages. Slide 5, the HOA security incident, complete with time-stamped clips of the shove. It was theatrical, petty, beautiful. When I was done, I transferred the whole thing onto a USB drive labeled Truth Bomb, Final Draft. The meeting was set for Friday night at the community clubhouse. By Thursday afternoon, everyone knew. Some were nervous, others thrilled. You could feel the tension humming in the air like a summer storm waiting to break. Karen hadn't said a word publicly since her glitter incident. Her driveway was empty, her blinds drawn. But the morning of the meeting, I noticed her silver SUV back in the driveway, freshly washed, as if she thought a clean car could erase the stain of everything she'd done. I looked down at the envelope of signed petitions in my hand, then at the neat row of neighbors' houses, glowing in the morning sunday. For the first time in a long while, I felt something like hope. Tomorrow night, the neighborhood would finally see the truth, unfiltered, undeniable, and maybe, just maybe, a little sparkly. The evening of the meeting arrived like the climax of a movie I'd been writing for months. The Willow Ridge clubhouse, usually reserved for bake sales and sad birthday parties, was packed wall to wall. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to each other in years were shoulder to shoulder, whispering, buzzing, ready. The smell of coffee and nerves filled the air. At the front of the room sat Karen Whitlow, flanked by her 2 silent allies on the HOA board. Stan, the nervous treasurer who never made eye contact, and Brenda, the secretary who wore perfume strong enough to mask guilt. Karen herself was immaculate, of course. White blazer pearls, that brittle smile she used like a shield. Her hands were folded neatly on the table, but I could see faint traces of green glitter clinging to her fingernails under the fluorescent lights. She opened the meeting like a politician facing a scandal, pretending everything was normal. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her tone rehearsed. "Before we start, I'd like to remind residents to remain civil and respectful tonight. We're all neighbors here." That line, "we're all neighbors here," might have worked before, but the room was ice. No one smiled. No one clapped. Now she continued, flipping through a stack of papers. "There have been recent misunderstandings circulating on social media regarding supposed thefts, false accusations, and lies someone shouted from the back." Karen froze, eyes narrowing. She scanned the crowd, but the voice disappeared into a sea of murmurs. She cleared her throat. "As I was saying, these rumors are malicious and damaging to our community's reputation. Certain residents," she glanced at me, "have taken it upon themselves to spread misinformation." I stood up slowly, laptop in hand. "Funny you mention information, Karen," I said. "I brought some of my own." The murmurs grew louder. I walked to the projector table, plugged in my USB drive, and turned toward the crowd. For those who don't know me, I'm Ethan Cole. I called this special meeting under Article X, Section 4 of our HOA bylaws. And tonight we're going to take a little journey together. Click. The projector hummed to life. On the wall appeared my title slide, "Our HOA, a Journey into Madness." The audience chuckled. Karen's jaw tightened. "Let's start simple," I said, clicking again. A photo of my supposedly improperly coiled garden hose appeared on screen. Exhibit A, the most dangerous hose in Willow Ridge. $50 fine? Cha-ching, I pressed a sound effect key, and the room erupted in laughter. Slide 2, my mailbox flag perfectly upright. Exhibit B, the crime of enthusiasm. Apparently I was too eager to receive mail. More laughter. Someone shouted. Same thing happened to me. Karen slammed her hand on the table. This is not appropriate. Hold that thought, I said, clicking to the next slide, because the fun's just beginning. Slide 3 showed footage from my porch camera, Karen walking up my driveway, clipboard under her arm, stealing the decoy package. The crowd gasped. On screen, she opened the box, the glitter bomb detonating in glorious high definition. The audience howled gasps, laughter, even applause. Karen's face turned white, then red, then something close to purple. That's private property, she screamed. You can't. Actually, it's my property, I interrupted. And the footage was recorded from my own porch with my own legally registered cameras. The laughter turned into cheering. Even Stan and Brenda looked like they wanted to vanish into their chairs. I advanced to the next slide. Now, some of you might think this was a one-time incident, but as it turns out, our dear president was running something far more sophisticated than a porch piracy hobby. The screen showed my UV-lit video of the storage unit glowing in green dust and stacked to the ceiling with stolen packages. The room went silent. You could hear the whir of the projector fan and the distant buzz of fluorescent bulbs. This, I said quietly, is lock-safe storage unit 143B, rented under the name Karen Whitlow. Everything you see here, electronics, clothes, toys, household goods, all traced to deliveries stolen from this neighborhood, many of them from you. Gasps turned into shouts. People stood craning their necks. Mrs. Gable covered her mouth. My Dyson, she whispered. Karen stood up shaking. This is slander. None of this proves. Oh, there's more. Next slide, the 2 hired goons on my porch. The footage showed them blocking my door, one of them shoving me. Henderson's voice rang from off-screen. That's assault. The shove played again in slow motion. You sent these men to my house, I said. Using HOA funds, by the way. I confirmed it with our treasurer's reimbursement logs. The crowd's noise rose to a roar. Brenda's hand shot up to cover her mouth. Stan looked like he might faint. Enough, Karen screamed. This circus is over. You're all being manipulated, but the room wasn't listening. I clicked one last time. The final slide appeared. Police case, Hashone 7452, theft and harassment investigation, Willow Ridge Estates. The seal of the local police department filled the screen along with the signatures of Sergeant Miller and Officer Reyes. It was official. Karen froze her lips, parting soundlessly. I filed that report weeks ago, I said. The evidence has already been reviewed. And while we're here debating community standards, law enforcement is finishing what we started. As if on cue, a distant sound cut through the chaos sirens. Everyone turned toward the clubhouse windows. Red and blue lights danced across the walls, strobing over shocked faces. 2 police cruisers and an unmarked van rolled up the driveway. The doors swung open, and Sergeant Miller strode in, flanked by 3 officers. His voice carried across the room like a gavel. Karen Whitlow, he said calmly, you are under arrest for felony theft, possession of stolen property, and criminal intimidation. Gasps turned to murmurs, murmurs into cheers. Karen's face drained of color. She stammered something. This is outrageous. I'm the president, as Officer Reyes stepped forward and read her rights. The handcuffs clicked. The sound was final. As they led her past me, she glared, pure venom in her eyes. You think you've won, Cole, she hissed. I smiled faintly. No, Karen. The neighborhood won. When the doors shut behind her, the clubhouse erupted applause, laughter, relief. Years of tension evaporated into the air like smoke after a storm. People hugged. Some cried. Mr. Henderson raised his cane and shouted motion to recall the entire board. Seconded, someone yelled. Hands shot up all over the room. The motion passed unanimously. Stan and Brenda gathered their papers and fled in silence. I stood at the podium, heart pounding, the weight of months lifting off my shoulders. For the first time, Willow Ridge didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a community again. I looked out over the crowd, the neighbors who'd been fined, threatened, silenced, now smiling, laughing, talking to each other like old friends. The glitter on the floor from my presentation sparkled under the lights. It wasn't just Karen who'd been exposed tonight. It was the illusion of control she'd built, the fear that had kept everyone obedient. And once fear was gone, there was nothing left to rule. The meeting ended not with anger, but with applause. Someone started chanting, "No more Karens," and the room burst into laughter. As I packed up my laptop, Sergeant Miller gave me a nod from the doorway. Nice presentation, he said. Maybe next time skip the glitter. I grinned. No promises. When I stepped outside, the night air felt cool and clean. The police cars pulled away their taillights, fading down the street. For For the first time since I'd moved here, I looked around and saw a neighborhood that felt free, not perfect, but ours again. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the start of something new, a second chance for Willow Ridge. By the next morning, the HOA's fortress had fallen. Word of Karen Whitlow's arrest spread faster than wildfire in a dry canyon. Screens lit up across Willow Ridge, phones, tablets, laptops replaying the moment she was led out of the clubhouse. Hands cuffed her pristine white blazer dusted with a few last flecks of green glitter under the floodlights. Someone uploaded the video to the neighborhood forum, and by sunrise it had already racked up hundreds of views. The comments section was a digital bonfire of celebration. Finally, justice served with glitter. Did anyone else see her try to wipe it off iconic? For the first time in months, I opened my front door without bracing for a violation notice. The air smelled like rain and freshly cut grass, the kind of morning you could almost mistake for peace. But peace, as I was learning, didn't come without cleanup. The HOA office, a small suite attached to the clubhouse, was sealed off with police tape. Officers were still cataloging files, receipts, and digital records. From the window, I caught glimpses of box after box being carried out, stolen packages, falsified invoices, and binders full of beautification fund withdrawals. Miller called me that afternoon. "You'll want to hear this," he said. "Turns out your little glitter trap led to more than porch piracy." According to the police, Karen had been running an entire resale operation. She and her teenage son had been stealing deliveries, not only from our neighborhood, but from 3 others nearby, using fake P.O. boxes and a rotating storage network to sell items online. Electronics, clothes, toys, even prescription skincare. The beautification fund was just a laundering channel. "How much are we talking?" I asked. He whistled softly. "Preliminary estimate, about 55 grand in stolen goods. Maybe more once we finish inventory." I leaned against the counter, half in awe, half disgusted. $55,000 stolen from her own community while fining people for leaving trash bins visible on collection day. "What about the board?" I asked. "Stan and Brenda cooperating," Miller said. "They're claiming ignorance, but we'll see what the books say. And those security guys, both in custody, hired with HOA funds." I couldn't help it, I laughed. "So even her intimidation tactics were embezzled." "Pretty much," he said dryly. "We'll be presenting charges for misuse of HOA assets too." "You did good, Cole. Your documentation made this airtight." When the call ended, I sat in silence for a long moment. I should have felt triumphant, but what I really felt was tired. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind the strange quiet that follows a storm. That night, I walked down to the clubhouse. The tape still fluttered in the wind, glowing under the street lamp like a warning ribbon. A few neighbors were gathered outside, Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Gable, and a younger couple, Sam and Leah, who had recently moved in. They waved me over like I was an old friend. "You did it, Ethan," Mrs. Gable said, smiling. "You really did it. We all did," I corrected her. She couldn't bully everyone forever. Still, Henderson added, someone had to throw the first punch. Or, well, he chuckled. The first glitter bomb. The group laughed, a genuine light sound that had been missing from Willow Ridge for years. Sam handed me a folded piece of paper. "We're organizing a temporary residence committee until the court sorts out the new HOA structure. We need volunteers." I took it, scanning the names. 24 signatures already. Real hopeful people taking charge again. I added mine at the bottom. Over the next week, the transformation began. The fountain Karen had installed in her front yard, the one she'd claimed was for the community's aesthetic benefit, was removed by order of the interim receiver. Turns out it had been paid entirely with HOA funds. The receiver, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Marianne Porter, wasn't interested in politics. "My job is simple," she told us at the first open meeting. "Audit every dollar, return what's stolen, and put this community back under legitimate governance." For once, everyone agreed. No shouting, no fines, no fear, just neighbors. Meanwhile, the police investigation made front-page news in the local paper. HOA president arrested in $55,000 package, theft ring exposed by resident's glitter trap. Mitch nearly fainted when he saw his handiwork mentioned. "A glitter bomb credited in the paper," he said, slapping my shoulder. "They should give us an award for innovation in suburban justice." I grinned. "Maybe just name a recycling bin after us." The real victory, though, was quieter. The next time a delivery truck pulled up, I didn't rush to the door. I watched from my window as the driver set a small box by my steps, a replacement garden hose, ironically enough, and drove away. 10 minutes passed. 15. The box stayed there untouched. That simple act felt like a revolution. 2 weeks later, the interim committee held another meeting to finalize new policies. The room looked different without Karen's looming presence. No more smug speeches or absurd dress codes. People spoke freely, laughed, even debated politely. I stood up toward the end, raising a hand. "I have one suggestion," I said. "Let's install secure parcel lockers near the clubhouse. Each resident gets their own code. We'll use part of the recovered funds. No more porch piracy." The idea was met with enthusiastic nods. Leah added, "And maybe cameras, real approved ones, so everyone feels safe." "Agreed," Marianne said. "Let's make this place something worth belonging to again." As the vote passed unanimously, I caught Henderson's eye across the room. He raised his coffee mug in a quiet toast. I smiled back. A month later, the lockers were installed, sleek numbered, painted a calm forest green. Every package arrived safe, every pickup logged. It wasn't just about convenience. It was a symbol proof that the neighborhood could govern itself with fairness without fear. Karen's old house sat empty for a while, the for sale sign tilting slightly in the wind. The once pristine lawn grew patchy, the fountain hole filled with rainwater reflecting the sky like an unintentional pond. Eventually, a new family moved in, quiet people, kind smiles, no clipboards in sight. Sometimes when I walk past, I still imagine Karen standing there, finger raised, shouting about mailbox flags or decorative rocks. Then I remember her in handcuffs, her blazer glowing faintly under the cruiser lights, and I can't help but chuckle. It's funny, really. All of this started because of a pair of sneakers. The Lunar Blaze. I still wear them, sometimes scuffed, broken in, perfectly comfortable now. They're my reminder that justice doesn't always come from courtrooms or laws. Sometimes it comes in a cardboard box filled with glitter and a good neighbor with a camera. That night, as I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee watching the quiet street and the hum of porch lights, my phone buzzed a new delivery notification. "Locker 27 package ready for pickup." I laughed softly. The number felt poetic somehow. When I retrieved the box and opened it under the warm glow of the clubhouse light, there was no dye, no glitter, no trap, just a simple note from Mitch. "To the guy who made glitter a weapon for good, thanks for reminding the rest of us that standing up works." I folded the note carefully, slipped it into my pocket, and looked around the street, peaceful, safe mine again. The real victory wasn't Karen's downfall. It was that, for the first time in years, Willow Ridge felt alive, not controlled, not perfect, but free. And as the breeze stirred, catching faint sparkles still trapped in the cracks of my porch, I realized something simple and true. Glitter never really goes away, not the kind that sticks to the truth. Freedom had a strange quiet to it. In the weeks following Karen's downfall, Willow Ridge felt like a neighborhood slowly waking up from a long, strange dream. The air seemed lighter. Lawns still got mowed, mailboxes still gleamed, but the tension that used to hum beneath every morning coffee was gone. The HOA bulletin board, once cluttered with warnings, violations, and reminder notes signed, the board was now blank except for a single handwritten sign taped in the center: "Community potluck Saturday 5 p.m. No fines, no clipboards. Just food." I hadn't realized how starved everyone had been for normalcy until that potluck. It started small misses. Gable's casserole, Henderson's chili, a few folding chairs, but by sunset the clubhouse lawn was packed. Kids darted between tables, dogs sniffed at plates, and the sound of laughter bounced off every house. No one wore a forced smile or looked over their shoulder for Karen's silver SUV. I stood by the grill with Mitch flipping burgers while the setting sun glinted off his safety goggles. He still wore them just in case, as though he might spontaneously start another glitter experiment. "You realize," he said, passing me a spatula, "we've accidentally become folk heroes. The glitter vigilantes of Willow Ridge." I laughed. "I'd prefer neighborhood watch too. Watch with style," he corrected. "So what's next, Mr. Cole? Gonna run for HOA president when the elections reopen?" The idea made me choke on a laugh. "Oh, absolutely not. I've had enough bureaucracy to last a lifetime." "Yeah," he said, grinning. "That's what they all say right before they get elected by popular demand." I rolled my eyes, but deep down I knew he wasn't entirely wrong. The interim receiver, Marianne Porter, had done a stellar job cleaning up Karen's financial mess. But she wasn't meant to stay forever. Eventually, the community would need a new board, real leadership elected fairly. And while I wanted no part of the title president, I also didn't want to watch another Karen rise from the ashes. The thought lingered long after the potluck ended. That night, as the last string lights dimmed, I walked home through the quiet streets. The houses, once coldly identical, now glowed with small personal touches that had been forbidden before. A painted bench here, wind chimes there, a gnome that would have driven Karen insane. Freedom had color again. When I reached my porch, I noticed a small padded envelope resting on the welcome mat. My chest tightened out of habit, but then I saw the sender's label, Willow Ridge Police Department. I tore it open and found a note from Sergeant Miller. Case update, official restitution process complete. Enclosed is your property receipt. Inside was a small card listing 2 items, 1 pair, Lunar Blaze sneakers and digital evidence drive, both marked return to owner. I smiled. Closure had never looked so simple. But tucked behind the paperwork was something else, a printed photo. Karen in court standing beside her attorney. Her expression wasn't angry anymore, just hollow, defeated. According to the caption, she'd pled guilty to 3 charges: theft, misuse of HOA funds, and harassment. Her sentence included restitution payments, community service, and a 5-year ban from serving on any homeowner's board. Grant, her son, had been placed in a restorative youth program. Community service counseling mentorship. He'd get a second chance, something his mother never believed in giving others. I slipped the photo into my notebook right between the first and last pages of the Whitlow file. The following weekend, Mary Ann called for an official community vote. A new board would be formed, transparent, accountable, neighborly. The meeting felt different this time. Open windows, homemade cookies, people chatting freely before things began. No podiums, no power posturing. When nominations opened, several names went up: Henderson for treasurer, Leah for secretary, Sam for community maintenance. And then before I could stop him, Mitch raised his hand. I nominate Ethan Cole for HOA president. The room burst into murmurs. I turned toward him, shaking my head, but he only grinned. You're the only one we actually trust, kid. You already read the bylaws more times than any of us ever will. Seconded, Mrs. Gable called out. I opened my mouth to protest, but then I saw the faces around me, smiling, hopeful, not demanding, just believing. For the first time, the title didn't sound like a punishment. It sounded like responsibility earned, not seized. When the votes were counted, I didn't even need a majority speech. It was unanimous. So that's how I, the man who once swore he'd never deal with HOA nonsense again, became the president of Willow Ridge. But I promised myself something that first night after being elected: I wouldn't be that kind of president. No fines, no fear, just fairness. The first policy I introduced was simple: the neighbor clause. It stated that every decision would start with a question. Would I want this done to me? If the answer was no, it didn't pass. It became our new golden rule. A few days later, a local journalist came by to interview me for a follow-up article titled "How Glitter Justice Rebuilt a Neighborhood." She asked the usual questions about the trap, the cameras, the trial, but then she leaned forward and said, "Tell me, Ethan, why'd you do it? Was it revenge?" I thought about it for a long moment before answering. At first, yeah, but it stopped being about revenge pretty quickly. It became about fairness, about proving that even one person can stop a system when it stops serving people. She smiled and closed her notebook. "That's a good line," she said. "Mind if I quote you? Only if you spell glitter correctly." After the article went live, we started getting letters from other neighborhoods, messages of support stories from residents dealing with their own tyrannical HOAs. Some even asked for advice. "How do we take ours back?" one email read. I answered every single one. Not as an expert, but as a reminder document: everything, stay calm, build allies, and most importantly, never underestimate the power of pettiness mixed with principle. Life eventually found a rhythm again. The police investigation wound down, the news cycle moved on, and the world forgot about the glitter incident. But we didn't. Every time sunlight hit the pavement just right, you could still see tiny flecks of green sparkle embedded in the cracks of Karen's old driveway, faint, stubborn, permanent. Mitch called them justice freckles. I like that. One afternoon, I passed by Grant outside the community park. He was helping repaint the playground fences as part of his court program. When he saw me, he froze, awkward and uncertain. I nodded first. He hesitated, then gave a small nod back. That tiny gesture said enough. Maybe he'd learned something. Maybe we all had. Now, every evening, I sit on my porch with my old sneakers, those once stolen Lunar Blaze resting comfortably on the railing. The world outside hums softly, kids laughing, dogs barking, sprinklers ticking in rhythmic peace. No violation letters, no fake security patrols, no fear. Just a neighborhood finally learning what it means to be a community again. And as the sun sets over, Willow Ridge catching the faint shimmer of glitter still clinging to the street, I can't help but smile. Justice, like glitter, has a funny way of sticking around. 3 months after the glitter bomb heard, round the cul-de-sac Willow Ridge didn't just look different, it felt different. The lawns still gleamed, the mailboxes still matched, but now they did so by choice, not fear. People waved again. Kids actually played on the sidewalks without worrying about HOA safety violations. It was as if someone had opened the blinds after years of living in fluorescent light. The police investigation had wrapped up, the restitution checks were being processed, and the local paper moved on to juicier scandals. But here in our once paranoid little neighborhood, we were still rebuilding not fences or flower beds, but trust. Being president of the new HOA wasn't glamorous. There was no salary, no perks, just a folding chair at community meetings and a Gmail inbox full of complaints about sprinklers, trash pickup, and lawnmower noise. But I didn't mind. For the first time, the president wasn't feared. I was just Ethan, the guy who'd once fought back with glitter and a camera. We drafted a brand new charter, one rooted in transparency and humor. Every meeting was recorded and uploaded online. Every fine, rare, and reasonable had to be voted on by the board. We even held a Karen Amnesty Day, where residents could anonymously shred old violation notices as catharsis. It was childish. It was perfect. But there was one thing left unfinished: Karen's property. Her house had been on the market for months. The for sale sign leaned like a tired soldier. The once perfect lawn had browned at the edges, and the fountain pit in front had filled with algae and rainwater. No one wanted to buy it, not because of the scandal, but because rumor said the place was haunted by the smell of hairspray and envy. Then one morning, a moving truck rolled in. I watched from my porch as a young family stepped out, a couple in their early 30s, and two kids chasing each other across the driveway. The woman wore overalls and a baseball cap. The man looked like he'd built the truck himself. They didn't carry clipboards or attitude, just smiles. "Welcome to Willow Ridge." I called, walking over. "Hey there," the man said, shaking my hand. "I'm Daniel. This is my wife, Rosa. We heard this neighborhood had, history." I chuckled. "You could say that, but the worst of it's gone now." Their daughter tugged Rosa's sleeve. "Mom, can we keep the sparkly stuff on the sidewalk? It's pretty." I looked down. Sure enough, the faint shimmer of green glitter still embedded in the pavement twinkled under the morning sunday. I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "You should. It's kind of a local legend." That weekend, we officially welcomed the new family with a neighborhood cookout, another tradition we'd started. People showed up with casseroles, ribs, and stories that grew funnier the more we retold them. Henderson brought a framed photo of Karen mid-glitter explosion, claiming it was a historic artifact. We hung it near the clubhouse door like a trophy. Mitch, as usual, handled the fireworks, small, safe ones this time. No dye, no lawsuits, he promised. As night fell, the clubhouse lawn sparkled with fairy lights. The kids ran around barefoot, and the adults sat in lawn chairs reminiscing about the time when everything felt impossible. When it was my turn to speak, I stood near the picnic table holding up a soda can. "You know," I said, "I used to think this story was about revenge, about getting even. But the truth is, it was never about the glitter or the trap or even Karen herself. It was about us, about realizing we didn't have to be afraid of each other." A quiet hum of agreement passed through the crowd. "Now look at us," I continued. "We have parcel lockers, real transparency, and more cookouts than citations. If that's not progress, I don't know what is." Laughter rippled. Someone shouted, "To the glitter bomb," and everyone raised their cups. "To the glitter bomb," I echoed, smiling. "And to community." The night stretched on, warm and full of chatter. For the first time, the clubhouse lights didn't feel harsh, they felt alive. Later, as the crowd thinned, Rosa came up to me. "So what really happened here?" she asked softly, glancing at the glitter-flecked sidewalk. I told her everything: the thefts, the storage unit, the fake security thugs, the recall vote, and finally the handcuffs. Her eyes widened, half shocked, half amused. "That's insane," she said. "Sounds like a movie." "Yeah," I admitted. It kind of was. "Who'd play you?" I laughed. Someone less tired, hopefully. She grinned, but her voice turned thoughtful. "You know, I used to live in a place like that where the HOA fined my dad because his pickup truck didn't fit the aesthetic. He never fought back. He just moved away. I'm glad you didn't." I looked around at the people cleaning up, the kids, chasing fireflies, the hum of laughter lingering in the air. "Me too," I said. When I finally walked home, the street was quiet again. My porch light flickered softly, reflecting off the few glitter specks still stubbornly clinging to the steps. I sat down on the railing, the cool wood beneath my hands, and thought about how strange justice can be. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just glows. The next day, I met with Marianne one last time. Her job as interim receiver was officially over. "I've seen a lot of communities implode after scandals like this," she told me as we signed the final paperwork. "But you folks did something rare: you rebuilt." "We didn't rebuild," I said. "We learned," she smiled. "Keep that up and you'll never need another glitter bomb." As she left, I glanced at the empty clubhouse. quiet sunlight streaming through clean windows. On the wall, still hung Henderson's framed photo of Karen immortalized in green fury. It reminded me that power built on fear always ends the same way, messy, loud, and covered in proof. That evening, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. No sender listed. Inside was a folded note written in looping, unfamiliar handwriting. "You don't know me, but I live 2 blocks over in Cedar Pines. We had a Karen of our own. After reading about your story, we're starting our own recall vote. Thanks for showing us how to fight back with evidence, not anger." I smiled as I folded the note. Maybe Willow Ridge's redemption wasn't just ours anymore. Maybe it was contagious. I slipped the note between the last pages of the Whitlow file, now thick with documents, receipts, and fading bits of glitter dust. It wasn't just a record anymore, it was a legacy. As night fell, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the distant laughter of neighbors. The streetlights flickered, catching the faintest sparkle on the pavement. It hit me then. I'd spent months fighting for peace, and now that I finally had it, it didn't feel empty, it felt earned. In the end, that's what glitter does. It sticks to everything it touches. Some people try to scrub it away, pretend it never happened. But some of us, we learn to let it shine. It had been almost a year since the night everything changed, the night the Queen of Fines was hauled away in cuffs, glowing faintly like a radioactive Christmas ornament. Willow Ridge had gone from a place ruled by fear to one guided by fairness, and though the lawns weren't quite as symmetrical anymore, they were finally alive. Spring returned with its usual stubbornness, blooming tulips, fresh paint, and 100 little signs of life, reclaiming what control had suffocated. We just celebrated the neighborhood's freedom anniversary, a date that used to mark the HOA's quarterly audit, but now marks something better: the day we took our power back. As I walked the familiar streets that morning, I noticed all the little rebellions that would have sent Karen into cardiac arrest: a lavender mailbox here, a wind spinner there, even a hand-painted mural of a sunrise on one neighbor's fence. Once those colors would have been fined into extinction. Now they were proof that beauty survived bureaucracy. At the end of Maple Court, the new family, the Rosas, were putting up a tree swing for their kids. Daniel waved when he saw me. "Ethan, come check this out." "Think the bylaws will allow this," I grinned. "Pretty sure the new bylaws say," and I quote, "if it makes the kids smile, it's approved." Rosa laughed. "Now that's governance I can get behind." I stayed for a while, helping them tie knots until my phone buzzed. A notification popped up from the HOA community chat, a message from Henderson, now the treasurer. "Mr. H meeting tonight, 6 p.m. Important update from the receiver's office. Bring that infamous notebook of yours, Cole." Ah, the Whitlow file. I still kept it worn, stuffed with every document, every printout, every ridiculous violation notice Karen had ever issued. Henderson joked it was our neighborhood's version of the Constitution. I wasn't sure he was wrong. That evening the clubhouse filled again, though the atmosphere couldn't have been more different from that chaotic night months ago. The lights were warm, coffee cups clinked, and the smell of homemade cookies replaced the sterile scent of Karen's old lavender air freshener. Marianne Porter, the former court-appointed receiver, joined us one last time via video call. Her face filled the projector screen, smiling. "Good evening, Willow Ridge. I'm officially closing your case. The HOA's finances are fully reconciled, the stolen funds have been recovered and redistributed, and I just want to say you've set a record for fastest community recovery in county history." Applause filled the room. Marianne continued, "I've overseen dozens of associations, and most implode after a scandal like yours. But you rewrote the rulebook. Literally. I've recommended your new bylaws as a model for other communities. I looked around at my neighbors, people who once hid behind curtains, now clapping, laughing, proud. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just running a homeowners association. I was part of a neighborhood that had finally remembered how to care." When the call ended, Henderson raised his mug. "To the man who started it all with a box of glitter and nerves of steel." The room turned toward me, cheering. I raised my hands, embarrassed but smiling. All right. But let's be honest, it wasn't nerves of steel. It was caffeine and spite." Laughter rippled through the room. Then a quiet voice spoke from the back. Grant Whitlow. I hadn't seen him in months. He stood near the doorway, taller now, older somehow, though he couldn't have aged more than a year. He wore a simple gray hoodie and carried a folder under his arm. The room fell silent. He started, voice hesitant. "I wanted to apologize. You could have heard a pin drop. I know it doesn't fix anything," he continued, "but I was part of it. The packages, the lies. I didn't understand how bad it really was until after everything fell apart. I've been doing community service and working with this mentorship group downtown. We help organize deliveries for shelters now." He gave a faint smile. Guess I've learned to handle packages the right way. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Mrs. Gable, bless her kind heart, stood and started clapping. One by one, everyone joined in. Grant nodded gratefully. I also brought this, he said, holding up the folder. It's something Mom wrote before sentencing. A letter. She asked the court to deliver it after the restitution was finalized. I thought you should have it. He handed it to me. My instinct was to refuse, but something in his eyes, guilt, humility, made me take it. Thanks, Grant, I said softly. After the meeting, I sat alone at the podium while the others left. The clubhouse was quiet except for the hum of the lights. I opened the letter. Ethan, if you're reading this, then I've had plenty of time to think. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know something I never admitted, not even to myself. It wasn't about power. It was about fear. I thought control would keep things perfect, keep people from hurting me or each other. Instead, I became the thing I feared the most, chaos disguised as order. You were right to stop me. You reminded everyone that community isn't about control, it's about care. If there's still glitter on that street, let it stay. Let it remind them what happens when one person forgets they're part of something bigger. Karen, I sat there for a long time staring at the ink. It was shaky, uneven, human. For the first time, I didn't see a villain. I saw a flawed person who lost her way and whose fall had forced the rest of us to find ours. I folded the letter and placed it in the back of the Whitlow file. It didn't erase what she'd done, but maybe in some strange way it completed the story. Outside, the night was warm and quiet. I walked down the familiar path toward my house, the same path where everything had started, the place where I'd stood furious and powerless watching a thief wear my sneakers. Now the porch light glowed softly, and my new delivery box sat secure beside the steps. I picked up a small package, a book I'd ordered weeks ago, and smiled. No fear, no second guessing, just life, normal and beautiful. Before heading inside, I looked down at the pavement. Under the lamplight, I could still see it, the faint, almost invisible shimmer of green glitter embedded in the cracks, eternal, stubborn, refusing to fade. It wasn't just a stain anymore. It was a symbol, proof that justice, when done right, leaves its mark, not to humiliate but to remind. I sat on my porch, unwrapping the package, the cool air brushing against my face. The neighborhood was quiet except for the hum of crickets and the faint laughter of kids still awake past bedtime. And I realized something simple, something that tied everything together. Sometimes the messiest things, glitter, conflict, chaos, can lead to the clearest kind of order. Not the kind written in bylaws, but the kind built on understanding. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and whispered to myself, half amused, half grateful. Turns out glitter really does stick to the truth. The porch light flickered once, catching a tiny sparkle on the steps below. I didn't brush it away. I let it shine. This story isn't just about an HOA or a Karen or even revenge. It's about community, the kind we forget we're capable of until someone forces us to remember. It's about how fear can masquerade as order and how justice doesn't always arrive in courtrooms. It sometimes comes disguised as a petty, glitter-filled act of defiance. Ethan's journey reminds us that fairness starts small, in the courage to document, to speak up, to protect what's right without losing ourselves to bitterness. It's proof that humor and humanity can rebuild what rules and fines destroyed. To everyone watching, if you've ever faced your own Karen or felt powerless in your own neighborhood, remember you don't need authority to make a difference. You just need courage, patience, and maybe a little sparkle. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because somewhere out there another HOA needs a hero with a glitter bomb.